Okay, welcome back to For the Property Investor podcast, here with our expert series interviews. And today we have the infamous Rich Harvey of Property Buyer. Thank you for joining me, Rich.
Great to be on your podcast, Owen. Always a pleasure chatting to you.
Great, thank you again. Rich, you've been in this industry for a long time. Since the dinosaurs were around in terms of buyers agents history. So please tell us a bit about how you got into the industry and how you've seen it change over the years.
Yeah, great. Well, we're certainly not a dinosaur buyers agency by any stretch of the imagination, but I actually started my business back in 2001, Owen. And I was previously working as a senior principal economist in government, crunching numbers every day of my life. And, I was always good at maths and that sort of thing and helping the government save the environment, basically. I worked at the Environment Protection Authority and got really sick of what I did there. And I used to read a book a week on property investment. I'd catch the train, 45-minute journey every day. And I just had a motivation to educate myself on property. And so I always had a passion for property. And, I really started my business out of a frustration. And the frustration was no one could give me a straight answer on property. There was all these property spruikers out there flogging off the plan apartments in the Gold Coast, right?
Yeah.
Or Melbourne or wherever in Docklands or something like, and no one would, and they always felt like snake oil salesmen, So I went to several financial planners and we ended up buying our first investment property through a financial planner. Obviously there was big commissions and undisclosed and we did okay out of it, but I just couldn't get a straight answer. So I just thought, look, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some people, and there are probably 3 or 4 other buyers agents who started before me. So I was probably one of the first of a handful of 4 people within Sydney to start a buyer's agency. But I started it because really I wanted honesty and transparency in the real estate game. There's always someone on the side of the seller, but there was no one on the side of the buyer, no one giving independent advice not tied to commission. So that really bugged me, and that really set me up. That was the reason I set up Property Buyer. And the other reason was also my brother got stung by one of those 2-tier marketing groups. They flew him up to the Gold Coast, said, "Hey, you should buy one of these properties." Took him on a Saturday. It'll be signed by Monday. It'll be gone. Fear of loss. And of course, he paid 50 grand too much. He held on to the property and then he sold it without getting advice. Sold it just before the market boomed. So worst possible entry and exit strategies. So I thought, gosh, people need protection. People need help. And I just thought if they can get a basic, straightforward fee-for-service model, it's a much better system than having these convoluted salespeople trying to flog properties.
And what was the experience like in those early days of firstly, was there any regulation about needing to be licensed or anything to be a buyer's agent?
Yeah, you absolutely. If you represent someone in a transaction, whether you're representing the buyer or the seller under the Property Stock and Business Agents Act 2001, you must be licensed. So anyone out there thinking they'd become a buyer's agent tomorrow, you must be licensed. Absolutely. So there are definitely strict regulations. The regulations have evolved. But there's still a problem of people particularly buying interstate without proper licensing. And you need to be very careful who you choose in that regard. And you should make sure, firstly, they're licensed and also a member of REBA, the Real Estate Buyers Agent Association of Australia. I served as the president of that organisation, but that just shows that you've got independent credentials, you follow a code of practice and you follow ethical principles. And also preferably a member of the local Real Estate Institute and a member of PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals Association. So but the laws have evolved. I was actually had a hand in revising some of those regulations and lobbying to government. But unfortunately, like in New South Wales, they dumbed the requirements down. You used to have to do 2 years as a trainee before you got your full real estate license. And for a period of time, they got rid of that 2-year requirement. And now they've brought it back to 1 year.
It's come back.
So it's like, imagine a builder just gets a building license on the basis of going to a TAFE course, right? You need practical experience, Can you imagine a doctor not getting trained in surgery before they perform surgery? Same with a buyer's agent. There's a lot of nuances around market research, around negotiating, around laws of exchange that need to be known before you're representing someone, because
Yeah.
When you're buying a property for someone, it's the most expensive purchase they're going to make in their lifetime. And, for me, you need the best advice you can possibly get.
Mm. And at that time, when you first started, was it mainly helping owner occupiers or investors?
Both
Okay.
investors. Yeah, absolutely. I was always a focus of mine to help investors and owner occupiers from day one, both because owner occupiers probably don't buy a property unless it's every 10 to 15 years. So there's a long time period between when people move. And then for the investors, a lot of investors just get confused or they get paralysis of analysis, which was the disease that I had when I first started. Right? I couldn't, I would analyze things to 5 decimal points, right, before I'd make a decision. And, I love the research. So I try to help people overcome their fears and get them comfortable that they can move forward and make a good decision.
And I'm sure the attitudes and reactions you get from sales agents have changed over this last 20 odd years. What was it like in the beginning when you would call a sales agent and say, I'm a buyer's agent? And what's it like these days, and how's it changed?
Yeah, there was a lot of fear when I first started. They push us away. They think you want a conjunction, you want a share of my commission. It's like, no, I'm completely independent. I get paid by the buyer. And at first they were just couldn't work us out. And then when they understood what we do, they embraced us with open arms because we brought a qualified buyer with a pre-approved finance, ready to buy. It took a lot of the pain out of the transactions, and the agents love us now. So it was a real education process in the early days. There was a lot of swimming uphill, walking
Yeah.
uphill to get things done. And particularly just the general public. You'd say, I'm a buyer's agent. And they go, what? A buyer? What does that mean? But these days it's very commonplace. It's become very well known.
Okay. All right. And do you get any pushback from many agents these days?
No, there's the occasional one that, there's one or two rogue buyers agents that really cheese off the selling agents. And unfortunately, they create a bit of a bad name for the rest of the industry. But there's not many. And I think some of those agents are a little bit naive in the sense that they don't want to work as closely with buyers agents. But I can tell you today, Owen, if anyone's buying a home, a lot of properties are sold off market, or they'll do a pre-market campaign. Now, who do those properties get sent to? They get sent to me as the buyer's agent. I'm on the buyer's agent list. I'm at the top of the tree. I get first dibs on pretty much any property that's going to become available. So the general public get, 2 or 3 rungs down the ladder. So that's how the pecking order works these days, and particularly whether it's a prestige or an ordinary run-of-the-mill property, that's typically what a lot of agents are doing. They reach out to their network, go, look, I've got some qualified buyers, bring them through. And if they don't get the offer they need, then they put it out to the general public on realestate.com.
Yeah. So a buyer inquiry and who controls it? Now, for many, many years, if not decades now, or well over a decade, the advertising portals of realestate.com.au and Domain have very much had a duopoly, and in some areas a monopoly by real estate for really controlling over 95% of all buyer inquiry. With the rise of the buyer's agent, especially in the last sort of half dozen years or so, how much has that shifted? And do you see that becoming more so in the future?
Great question. Yes, is the answer to that. So we're finding that we are getting a lot more inquiries directly now from vendors looking to sell because they understand that the buyer agent doesn't take sales commission. So I've done several transactions direct to vendor where we can match up one of our buyers with what the vendor is offering to sell and get it at a fair price.
Okay.
So we're finding that's definitely an opportunity. But look, realestate.com still has the monopoly. And then you've got Domain, and then you've got Homely. And there's a couple of other websites, Real Estate View, etc. And look, they're all snapping at the heels. But, realestate.com did a bit of price gouging, pretty serious price gouging of all the agents and vendors and they keep trying to ratchet up their marketing fees. And there's a lot of pushback to that. Ridiculous amounts of money goes into advertising.
Is that where you're seeing a lot more of these off-market or pre-market opportunities coming to buyers agents directly from agents?
Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. So we're seeing that that's a great opportunity for us and for our client base to get into a property where there's less competition on a property as well.
And are you seeing, have you seen any stats come out yet in terms of how many transactions are being done off market or pre-market before going to the portals?
That's a very difficult one to answer, but I can tell you anecdotally, the percentage is absolutely increasing. So if you take, say, the eastern suburbs in Sydney, it's an absolute premium market. And I would say probably 50 to 60% of properties above 5 million will probably be sold off market in that area.
Wow.
Right? So very, very large percentage. North Shore, Northern Beaches, it could be 20 to 30% of the premium end of the market, right?
Yeah.
And as you filter out to other suburbs, it'll be much lower percentages, but a percentage will still always be sold off market as a strategy by the agents.
And that's if a trend's going to start, it's always at the top end, and it will start to filter down. And so it's a good thing for the market if we can break that, especially that monopoly that real estate has, and to give them some competition.
Well, exactly. And one thing, another service, I'm not sure if you're aware that we offer a vendor advocacy service. So as well as a buyer advocacy, we offer a vendor advocacy. That means we don't sell the property, but what we do is match up a potential buyer on our books. Or if we don't have a buyer, then we help shortlist the best selling agent, and we make an introduction and a referral, and we disclose any fees that are paid for that. But we help them pick the best agent, because the ordinary buyer, ordinary seller may not know how the agents actually operate throughout that selling process. And we get at a very granular local level to work out, all the agencies, which ones are the really tough negotiators that squeeze every dollar out for their vendors versus those agents that are a bit lackluster and just a transactional and just want to get onto the next deal. And I know who I'd want to be selling my house. I'd want someone who's really working in my best interests. So we can recommend that agent, and we get on with them on a very professional basis.
Great. And that's starting, I'm starting to see that myself with a few more specialist vendor advocates out there who are just specializing in helping home sellers find a good agent for them.
That's right.
So
it makes a huge difference. I mean, I'll give you one example. I just helped a lovely older gentleman who was referred by my financial planner sell a property in Pymble. Now, when we first started the campaign, he thought he might get 2.6, 2.65. Now, I shortlisted 3 agents. They did their pitch. He ended up going with the one that the commission was sort of in the mid-range, not at the top, not at the bottom, but a good. He thought, it's a bit expensive. Why don't we go the cheapest? And I said, look, you get what you pay for. And I said, this particular agent, I've known him for 20 years. He really is good with the buyers. He knows how to create competition. Ended up getting 2.8 for this guy, right? So it can make $100,000 to $200,000 difference or more, depending on the property, for who you choose as a selling agent at the end of the day.
Yeah, I've always said don't go for the cheapest agent, because they'll try and get a quick and cheap result. So
my favorite line, Owen, about choosing advisors. It's if you think a professional is expensive, try hiring an amateur.
Yes, exactly. They can cost you money.
Exactly.
All right. So your business itself. So you've grown to have a national business now with many buyers agents that work with you under your brand. So whereabouts do you cover?
So, propertybuyer.com.au, we're based, our head office is in Sydney, but we have offices in Melbourne, in Brisbane, Gold Coast, Central Coast, and Newcastle. We can also buy for our clients in Adelaide and Perth. We have contractors and referral partners in those areas. So myself, I'm managing the team. That takes a lot of my time, but I buy personally on the Northern Beaches and the North Shore. That's where I live, just doing my local area. Absolutely love the Northern Beaches. I'm about to start a brief next week for a client looking to buy around the Manly area, one of my favourite suburbs. So yeah, that's the areas that I cover personally myself.
Okay. And what for investors specifically, what are you seeing that's happening in the market, and what feedback are you getting from the whole team of what's happening across the market in general, across the country, and any specific areas that are really booming for what reason?
Yeah, look, the investors have been, I guess, a bit fearful, and it's been challenging for investors the last 12 months because we've had 13 rate rises. We've got mortgage rates around 6.5%, cash rate at 4.35%. So borrowing capacity is down 35%. And that's hamstringing a lot of investors that want to borrow, but they can't afford to get enough to get into the market. But as we know, there's a rental crisis, there's a housing shortage. We're not building enough homes to keep up with demand. So the investors that are out there that I speak to absolutely want to buy, but the key issue is getting finance approved. So one of my big tips for anyone listening is to make sure you work with a really good finance broker, because I've seen people use a broker that perhaps is not as experienced or doesn't have the right panel of lenders, particularly second tier and third tier lenders, that enable them to maximize their borrowing capacity. And then, a lot of people sit back for a year, go, oh, the market's too toppy, But I can tell you, look, the first 6 months of this year, we're recording this in 2024, beginning of 24, is going to be a great opportunity for investors to buy, because while there's economic challenges, the herd doesn't get involved, right? The herd sits back. They wait. Everyone's waiting for that perfect time to buy, right? There is no perfect time to buy. It was yesterday, right? But if you can buy when you've got finance approved, that's a great time to buy. Buy when you've done your research. Buy when you've found a good opportunity that the numbers stack up. That's a good time to buy. So I think people are trying to identify this absolutely perfect window on the 15th of March 2024 when it's going to be the right time to buy. That may not be the right date for you.
I was a mortgage broker for 12 years, and people would always ask me, oh, when's the best time to buy? It's like, when you can get the finance approved and you've got the ability to buy, that's the best time to buy. Buy the best property you can find in the market right at that point in time.
Exactly. And then what you do is let capital growth do its thing, right? I mean, I bought 3 properties the year before last. I had very good borrowing capacity. Actually, I bought 4 because I added a granny flat. I'm currently building 2 duplexes. So I went all out, right? But I hadn't bought the previous year because my numbers are a bit lower. So again, as soon as I've got some capacity, bang, I'm in the market and I stretch myself, right? And I do it for a reason, because I know that once I've built these properties or bought these properties and I rent them out, my rent's probably going to be even better than what I expected. And then when I revalue them, I just again look at the supply demand situation in Australia, and I know that what I've estimated it to be worth, it's going to be worth a bit more, simply because there's a shortage of properties. So there's a really good equation out there underpinning any investor's mindset at the moment, and that is the word undersupply. So if we have a fundamental undersupply, that's going to really help property investors to think about getting into the market. And the other thing, you're also doing a social service. If you're buying investment property, you're actually helping to provide rental accommodation for other people. So it's a good thing to be doing.
And the more supply in the market then of rental properties, that'll actually help to bring rents down eventually if there's enough supply.
It's a long road to go yet, mate.
I know, and that's the problem in this market right now, where there's a lot of people hurting with paying ever increasing rents, and property prices in a lot of markets increasing, and year after year. And interest rates up till now, we seem to be in a holding pattern right now, but interest rates have been increasing quite a lot in the last 2 years. So what advice, because I'm getting a lot of feedback on the socials from people saying, I'm struggling to keep up with raising rents, and let alone trying to save for a deposit to buy the house that I'm living in, or that I'd like to live in. What are you've helped a lot of people get into the market over the last 23 years. What advice do you have, and what do you recommend to them to be able to get started in this type of market?
Sure. Great question. I've got a lot of ideas to give you and for your listeners for this question, and I think it's a really important one. I think firstly, it's really important that you have at the basic level a personal budget. It's really important that you have financial discipline in your life before you go and buy a property, because what buying property does, it actually keeps you financially disciplined, because you've got to put money across to a mortgage each month. And if you don't keep up with those payments, eventually you could lose the property. So it's important to buy within your limits, but also make sure you are possibly stretching yourself a little bit, not uncomfortably, but readjusting your, I guess, priorities so that you do get into the market as soon as possible. My wife and I bought our first property at age 25 or 26, I think it was. And we've never looked back. It was a really good decision and we absolutely don't regret it. And obviously bought multiple properties since then. But I think firstly, getting a budget is a key thing. The other thing is a lot of people go, oh, Sydney's too expensive or Melbourne's too expensive, and just kind of give up the idea. We'll be renters forever. But you can do the typical thing of rent vesting. It's a great strategy. And in fact, I'm actually helping a lot of my sons and their friends. I'm helping a lot of them actually to buy investment property interstate where it's a lot cheaper. We just bought one the other day for a client in Brisbane for under 500K. So you can still buy good quality properties interstate that will be virtually cash flow neutral or cost just 20, 30, $50 a week to hold. And that's a really good investment long term. And as rates start to come down, you might see them becoming positive. So you can, again, there's no one size fits all either. A lot of people go, what strategy should I use? Well, again, it depends on your income and depends on your life stage. So for some people, they can heavily negatively gear. Other people must get positive cash flow. And again, we can find all of those types of properties for our clients. And there's, as I say, not a one size fits all. So I think back to your question, how do you get out of the rent cycle? Get into the market as soon as you can. So I think another tip is to keep upskilling your job skills and try to increase your income. So if you can study or keep applying for jobs, keep asking for more responsibility at work, and show and demonstrate your value. No one's going to give you a property on a silver platter and say, oh, well done, Johnny, here's a property. You've got to get out there and earn it. I think the age of entitlement is still pervasive, where we think we're owed something, but in fact, you've got to work hard. I've worked very hard all my life to get where we are, and we've made mistakes, we've made some really good decisions, but you've got to roll with it and learn how to improve your situation. And it's not just for money's sake either. Enjoy the journey. There's reasons for creating wealth to help others and contribute to your family, and they're some of the big drivers for me as to why I've wanted to create wealth through property.
Okay, so to give a bit of an example of that rent vesting and how it could work, in Sydney, the average cost of a house is about $1 million, and
that's 1.5 in Sydney.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it depends on what you call Sydney as well, but yes. But yeah, that $1 or $1.5 million house is not necessarily a fantastic suburb. It's and you're not anywhere near Sydney City necessarily in that in that $1 to $1.5 million house. So so people in Sydney who are looking at, they've got maybe up to a $50,000 deposit, which seems like nothing in comparison to what they need. And they might even have less than that. You're saying that there's options for them to be able to get into the market, into a good market anywhere else somewhere in the country to be able to at least own something and get a step up.
That's right.
What sort of price point would that start at?
Yeah, well, again, we can buy houses for people in even 400 to 500K, and again, they'll be in regional locations. It might be it could be in parts of Queensland, it could be in parts of the Hunter Valley, could be parts of the Central Coast. But I think we've got people on the ground in those locations to find those opportunities. I'm always a big believer in buying as much land content as you can rather than buying apartments. So certainly you can buy cheaper apartments, or also a good compromise is a townhouse. Depending on your budget. Like let's say you've only got 400K, but you want to be closer in. You want some sort of investment that's closer into the amenities. A townhouse still has good low maintenance, but a bit more land content than what an apartment would have. Another sort of tip I would give too, Owen, is for investors on limited incomes or low budgets is to consider paying lender's mortgage insurance. Again, this is not financial advice, but it's just what I did myself personally early on in my career. If I had like 100K deposit available, instead of spending that whole 100K on one property, I split it into two properties and I got a 90% loan to value ratio. It cost me an extra 1 or 2% for the loan, Again, you can amortize. That means you can then claim it as a tax deduction over 5 years. But that's a way to then get more property into your portfolio at an earlier stage and watch it grow. Because I knew that the capital growth of the areas I was buying in was going to more than compensate for paying that LMI on the insurance for the loan. So that's one way.
Yeah.
That's a
And
financial.
a good mortgage broker will be able to help explain that to anyone as well, because that's their job.
Exactly. And the second way is using the bank of mum and dad. Very common way these days. And look, I'm going to help my boys to do this. We've decided that we're going to use some of the equity in our property. And you do, again, through a mortgage broker, they'll explain this, but using a limited equity guarantee loan. So the parents might have a house worth, say, $2 million, might be paid off, might have a small loan, whatever. But they want to give, or not gift, but loan their kids $100,000 equity to use as a deposit for a home. Now, for their kids to save up 100 grand might take 5 years, right? But the beauty of the parents helping them out is that it's available immediately, right? It doesn't cost the parents anything. It just there's a slight risk, pretty low risk, as long as they buy the right property. But it then enables their kids to get into the market. So we're seeing a lot of first home buyers and a lot of investors using the bank of mum and dad in order to get into the market at a faster time frame.
Okay, all right. A lot of good tips there. I do have a mortgage broker coming on the podcast sometime soon, so I might ask them about this limited home equity scheme, and because at least the kids who are they're still borrowing that money, they're still liable.
They're still liable. It's just a limited equity guarantee. So the parents just guarantee the loan, but the kids are actually doing the borrowing. So they're using the security of that property as well as the property they're buying to get the loan.
Yeah, it sounds like a no-brainer to me. But all right, so the basic advice there is get a good mortgage broker and get a good buyer's agent, and put their heads together. And it's just about getting into the market so that people can get a start, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I think I didn't quite answer one of your other questions about locations. I think it was too. You asked about where are some, like, I mean, we're talking about strategies and where to buy. I think, look, there's some great property locations for investors around Australia at the moment. A couple of our favourites that's good is Brisbane and the Gold Coast. So Brisbane, as we know, will have the Olympics in 2032. That's not the only reason to invest. You know, Brisbane's a great lifestyle city. We've seen a huge amount of interstate migration coming out of Sydney and Melbourne, moving to those areas, particularly during COVID. And I think that trend is just going to continue, partly because of affordability, partly because of lifestyle. I know lots of friends and other family that have moved up there, but Brisbane's a great city. It's got a really nice layout. Yes, it's hot in summer, but it's got a great vibe. I really like it. Every time I go up there, I really enjoy hanging out in Brisbane. So that market has performed really well, and we're tipping that market will probably grow 10% this year. So very competitive buying, good rental returns up there. Typically, we're getting at least 5% gross on our rentals in that area, sometimes higher. We've also got some strategies that we use with what we call rooming houses, where we can get a 6 to 8% return on the properties. You do need around $1 million to buy that sort of property, but we can get some higher yield properties there too. And the Gold Coast, great market, wonderful lifestyle. Both houses, townhouses and apartments, really good location. Again, you've just got to be careful exactly where and what you buy in these areas. And like there's little things like the backs of the canals of the Gold Coast. Not many people know that there's these little things called midges, right? They're like little mosquitoes. And if you buy there, you're going to get bitten by midges every night. So there's certain pockets streets you don't want to buy in. But you won't know that unless you use a local buyer's agent. He's going to tell you that sort of stuff, right? But there's also the new train line that's coming, or the new light rail that's gone right through the Gold Coast. It's also coming of age, Lots of developers are building up apartments along that whole beachfront, along Hedges Avenue, etc. So we're seeing a lot of downsizers also sell up in Sydney, Melbourne, and buy their waterfront apartment for $2-3 million. So
it's not just a tourist trap and a retirement village anymore, is it?
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's one market. Another market we really love is Newcastle, the lakes, the lakes area and Central Coast. Again, same similar reasons. It's only an hour and a half to 2 hours from Sydney. Really good lifestyle, much more affordable. and some wonderful pockets. I just bought up last year at Umina Beach myself for an investment, added a granny flat. So a lot of clients go, Rich, what are you doing? And then they emulate what I've done as well. But
Yeah.
we've got a guy on the ground on the Central Coast, and yeah, it's a really good market. Yeah, some pockets have sort of higher rental demand than others. But again, just picking those locations. Another area is parts of Melbourne. So some of the
Okay.
bayside suburbs of Melbourne are really good. Heading down toward Frankston,
Okay.
that sort of area. Again, still quite affordable and about 45 minutes from the city.
Yeah.
So we're finding some areas out there. And also good quality apartments in Melbourne are getting good yields. Like we bought one in Albert Park. I think it was about 650,000. We're getting $700 a week for that, and
Wow.
it's really good location. So we know that that'll perform really well. That was for an expat client just recently. So there's opportunities everywhere. You just got to know where to look and how to find them.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, we might leave it there, Rich.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us. You got a lot of gold, a lot of great information in there. So thank you very much for that. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, apart from your website, you're on all the socials, I take it?
Yeah, so propertybuyer.com.au is our website. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, on Facebook. I do a regular podcast myself. I do a bunch of blogs. Plus, the most important thing is my monthly update. I do a lot of really insightful commentary, and I also do a lot of webinars as well. So it's all there on our website.
Fantastic. All right, Rich, until next time, thanks for joining us on For the Property Investor podcast.
Thanks, Owen. Appreciate it.